In some cultures or societies, bullying is kind of the normal. Today, we're going to meet a lady who was raised up in this kind of culture and realized this was not right. We'll get into it after I hit this music. Joining me this week is Jenny Lee. Jenny, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, I'm really excited to be talking about this topic of how cultures bullying is kind of the norm. It's how they gain control. It's how people are, I guess, would say they're just kind of used to it. But you realize that this is not how I should be treated. So let's start back from your childhood. Tell us what it was like growing up.
Thank you. So I grew up in Indonesia, and I was born to a Chinese family, and I also went to Catholic church and Catholic schools. And so Indonesia itself is a pretty conservative culture. And then added the religion of Islam. There's like a lot of conservatism in there. And the family that I was born in, Chinese, they're also conservative. Then you add Catholicism in there and Catholic school there, and it's just a bad combination for someone who is as free thinking as me. How's that?
Yeah.
Because however I moved, it was never the right move. And I was always considered a misfit, I guess. And I could never say the right thing. I could never do the right thing. And so yeah, in order for them put me in the mold to fit in the mold, they just had to use a lot of punishment so that they could maintain the uniformity.
So when you were younger, like let's say kindergarten, were you taught how you were supposed to act as a young girl?
Pretty much. Yeah.
What was the
Which is in
expectations?
expectations are how ugh, well, if you actually went back to the 1800s, how kids were supposed to behave, that's pretty much how it was, right? You
Wow.
don't talk back. You're okay, especially as a girl. I remember I loved moving a lot, and I still do. I was pretty active, but it was just not. It was something to be frowned upon. I remember seeing a classmate, a boy, and he was sweating all over because, yeah, it was during break. He was running around playing like a little kid, of course. Um, but then he came back to class sweating, and the teachers thought it was disgusting. And he was being told to stand in the corner of the classroom and take off his shirt. And he was like crying and sobbing at the corner of the classroom, because he felt humiliated.
Yeah.
And then, as for me, I don't even remember what I did, but I remember being punished as like one of the very few kindergarten memories that I had. Um, I was 5. Like, I don't even remember what I did to deserve that. So yeah, I was told to, stand in the corner and, like, humiliated and, being yelled at. Yeah, so that was a very interesting experience because then starting then, it was just really consistent. Throughout school, I was always punished and yelled at, and I was never really fitting. So I didn't have any friends because
Yeah.
the teachers were always picking on me, and other kids would see me as like, oh well, I don't want to be friends with her because the teachers hate her, and so I was kind of like ostracized pretty much. Yeah, it was what it was like pretty much. And as for the punishing, corporate punishment, right? That was pretty crazy, that it was legal. Oh, well, I mean, it's abuse now, categorized as abuse, but back then, I would say, be expected to know certain equations. For example, this is chemistry, right? This was in high school. This is up to high school, and the teacher had this really big ruler that's probably about, I don't know, 4 feet long and 5 inches wide and,
Yeah,
like,
big old
quarter
yardstick.
inch, yeah, yardstick, but it was, they use it as a ruler, um, and because we used blackboards back then, right? That's how they made straight lines. But they would use that to punish kids who, didn't meet expectations. And so, all right, so that's the equation, or whatever chemical element. So, what is the expected reaction? And I was like, well, I never liked math. I never liked numbers and combination of numbers and letters in chemistry. That was just too much for me, especially also because I had this block, and I have been told all through my academic years that I was lazy. Um, I was never really a high achiever, and and it was just really discouraging. So I just, it was like a self prophecy,
Yeah.
self fulfilling prophecy, right? And so when I couldn't answer the question, I remember the teacher well, he would swing that ruler on my butt. And I was like, try again. And I got it wrong again. And well, I remember he did that 3 times on my leg and another time on my butt. So yeah, that's how far they would go when it comes to punishing
I wonder what data they've
and
had.
bullying. Hmm.
I wonder what data they had where if you keep smacking a kid, the answer magically appears in their brain. I don't understand that.
Right?
Like,
Yeah.
where'd they get that from?
And that's also a part of that shaming, which is a part of bullying, right? It's like they feel that if they shame you into complying, then they would call that respect,
Hmm.
when really they just want to plant fear in you.
So
Um,
besides your urge to move around, play, and not being able to learn the way they're teaching you, what else were you doing that you kept getting in trouble for in school?
I never liked doing homework. And, that was also because I never felt like lessons were interactive enough for me to even, get my attention, because they never this is what I thought, like, except for art, even with art, they kind of want art to be uniform.
Yeah.
So the beautiful painting looks like this, so paint like this, you know? Um, but and other things like writing, we were taught Indonesian, literature, and there was never room for creativity in writing. And so everything was just, like, super bland, and I just wasn't interested, and so I hated homework. I never did, homework, and I never did well at exams and all of that, and so, my mom would come home at some point and complaining about how poorly the teachers, told her, my performance was, how poor my performance was, basically, and she was like, "Well, other parents had kids who had something to say that made them proud about their kids, but I didn't." So that was really interesting that my existence as a child for her is to make her proud, right? So that was a fact. But as like I was a tween that time, and that's what was planted in my mind. I was a disappointment. I would never amount to anything. I could never, fulfill anybody's expectations, and that was really damaging to my self-esteem and my self-worth, right? Well, in addition to that, when I get out of the house, because of the way I look, I have small eyes and probably fairer skin. I don't look like the local Indonesians, and that was a subject for bullying too, because all right, you're Chinese and your people took land from us, so you're here because you had a mercy or something like that. There's like, that depreciating kind of act, that they impose upon people who don't who don't look like them, basically,
Yeah.
and I would walk home from school, in my Catholic school, uniform, and I would get harassed, like racial slurs thrown at me, or sexual harassment. Me in my Catholic school uniform. And, it's all because, there is, like, certain level, or standard, that they don't see I'm meeting.
Yeah.
And, like, who I am as a whole is just, not like them.
I can't believe that you could be the only kid that was struggling to learn the way they were teaching. Did you know of other kids who had the same problems as you, or was it just you?
I really don't remember anymore, but I was definitely not the only kid who was
Okay.
being beaten, you know?
How was the teaching style back in school, like, from
Very
kindergarten to,
one
like, high
way.
school? One way,
Very
so
one way. There was nothing interactive
was there, like,
about.
help? Do they have, like, okay, if you struggle in this area, you go to a special class for extra help?
Oh, no, there's no such thing. I
Okay,
mean, you could go, for, like, a tutoring, but it's something that you will have to pay extra for, like hiring
okay.
a tutor to teach you and, help you with your homework, but I was given a tutor, but I just couldn't register anything, because I already had this in, um, there's intrinsic motivation
Yep.
and extrinsic motivation, but I did not have, like, I did not find learning math or anything that's school related to be motivating at all.
I think
Um,
their extrinsic motivation was not to get hit.
yeah, pretty much. That
Yeah.
was the environment that they were setting. So
Was
yeah,
that just in Catholic schools, or was that in, like, all the schools in that country? Is that how they kinda just treat people?
this is really interesting, right? The country as a whole. So this kind of continues. When I was in university, they had some kind of this process for the first year student. That's like hazing
Okay.
for frat house. Would you
Yep.
call that like sorority and
It's hazing.
fraternity
Yep, yep,
hazing? Yeah.
yep.
So this is what they call it, right? Like, um this is to cultivate respect for seniors and the elderly. And we would, the first week that we were there, we were told to do, like, the most despicable things, right? Like walk on your knees, and they would yell at you. And when you ask for clarification, they would yell at you and or punish you. It's like, yeah, this is like how you were being taught to respect your seniors, basically.
Yeah.
But it was just like abuse. And I think the second year after that, they I guess they saw that as an abuse, and so 2 years after that, they were like, "All right, we can't do this anymore, because this is unethical." And we don't want to be responsible if anybody gets hurt from the hazing, like the hazing week. Um, and you know what happens after that? Also the students were really angry. They were like, yeah, like, all the first year students are so disrespectful. They're such brats because we didn't do the hazing week, you know.
Y
So this was enforced by, like, even like not even the previous generation. So my theory is that, well, you've heard, only hurt people hurt other people, right?
Yep.
So it's pretty much the same. They felt that it was unfair that they had to go through the hazing week, and they want to see other people suffer the same fate that they did, at the hazing week. Um, and also, it's really interesting what a lot of them find. Well, it's like, from my observation, they seem to get satisfaction from putting people down. It's yeah, it is weird, but I have a feeling it is because, they were hurt. They were oppressed,
Yeah.
and they were suppressed, and that was how they take it out, right? And apparently it's acceptable. So that's like, as a whole. My experience from school to university, right? Now,
Okay.
for women, being born a woman in that culture, this is really interesting, like how I was told what I can be. Because, of course, as a girl, being born a woman, there's this path that you're supposed to take, right? Eventually, you're supposed to be a wife and a mother. And if you don't fulfill that, then you have no value. That's what I was
Yeah.
taught. Um, and interestingly, you are also not expected to achieve what men could achieve. I could give you an example. So I was having this conversation with my mother's friend, and this was when I just started college, and she asked me what I was studying. I said, education. "Oh, okay, so you're planning to be a teacher when you finish?" Yeah. Oh, that is so good for you. And it's an easy thing to learn, and I'm glad you took that path. My daughter wants to be an engineer. Like, what girl wants to be an engineer? Why can't she just do what you're doing? Girls are not supposed to be engineers. That's what she said about her daughter, that, she was giving
Wow.
her a headache because she picked um, a path that she thinks is hard for girls, right? It's like, okay, whatever. And there was also this conversation that I overheard when I was at a salon, the hair salon, and there was a hairdresser that was taking care of another customer. And she said, "Oh, I'm supposed to go to this doctor for what you to check on something or whatever." I was like, "Hey, that's good that you're doing that regularly." And the customer said, "Woman, well, but it's a woman doctor. What doctor? Like women shouldn't be doctors."
Hmm.
Basically, I
What
said,
year
"How
is
can I?"
this again?
This
What year
was
is this?
just a few years ago.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
yeah, how can I have any respect for that doctor if she's a woman? So when it comes to misogyny, even the women are supporting that, right? It's like, instead of lifting them up, saying that, hey, you could do this, you could do whatever, but they keep women to be where they are because there's like all these rules that they need to run in a certain way. Like,
Yeah.
they're being put in the box, stay in that box, basically. And also culturally, like what I told you about the first year university students that are hazed,
Yep.
that was really the objective of that. The purpose is to keep them in the box. You act the way that we want you to act. Like, we want you to have fear for people who are your seniors, like, who are older than you. And that is so um that really stunts your development, your self-worth and self-esteem, right? But that's the kind of society that they want. They would call that
Wow.
humility, they would call that humble, but no, you just don't have a good sense of self-worth because
So
that's so that you're easy to control that way.
yeah,
Because if you
so
don't follow that, then you are disrespectful, right?
yeah, so growing up, you're labeled as a problem all through
Mhm.
school. When did you realize that this is not right how I'm being treated?
Oh, I think I've known the whole time, but there was really nothing I could do about that because, like, well, if I said something, that would be, well, that's because you were never good at school. Of course, they treat you like that. You deserve it,
Yeah.
but
But
of
you
course.
took steps to leave that country though, so what was that like? Like, how'd you get out of that?
So after I finished school, I got a job, and that's when I started to get detached from my family and from the community that I grew up in. There was a little freedom there because I got some financial independence, and then I got a job offer from an international school in Thailand, in Bangkok, and that was when I felt. So I moved to Bangkok. It's a Buddhist country. Most of the people there are Buddhist. And they were probably like the most accepting group of people that I know so far in my life. Because that was when I started to feel, wow, I've never felt more at home than here because I was not being judged. I could wear whatever I wanted to wear. Um, and I was always welcome with a smile. As long as I'm respectful, they respected me. And then I learned that they have this philosophy: people could do whatever they want. That's their karma. I'm going to mind my own business. It's like,
Yeah.
this is perfect. Why didn't people have that where I grew up? You know what I mean? They're always in other people's business because they try to like make them like, in such a way that they expect that they should be like putting them in a box, fit a
Yeah.
mold, right? And that's not how I felt when I was in Bangkok and I felt like I could be myself more. Then, all right, this is what life should be. I should be free when I'm expressing myself, and I should not feel like I had to fit in something, right, in order for me to feel accepted and feel like I'm worthy. Um, so yeah, that was the first time I got to understand that I didn't have to be like that, like when I was in Indonesia.
Do you have, like, any friends that still stayed back, or did they move out as well?
Yeah, I do have friends who from college, a couple of them, and one of them is Muslim, and she's actually a really really great girl. She is super educated, and this is really interesting. She is smart, and she was foreign educated, so she went to Belgium to get her master's. And when she came back, she got engaged, and she broke her engagement and gave her father a heart attack. Like literally, he had
Oh,
to go to the
wow.
hospital. Um, and this is their logic. Of course, that she brought shame to her family by breaking an engagement. People don't do that there. You don't like a boy. You don't like the man that you're married to or you're supposed to marry. Then you just gotta suck it. But you need to be married. You need to have a husband, right? But she is on a different level. That's why she had the courage to do that. And interesting, the logic that they presented to her was well, of course, she was like, I can't marry that guy because I know that I will be miserable. But their rebuttal was, why do you care more about your life now and not the afterlife? Why do you choose
Oh, wow.
to indulge yourself now and then you will suffer in the afterlife? You know what
So
I
they're
mean?
using religion to scare you.
Yes. I mean, that's
That's
what's with Catholicism too, right? So when I decided to get out of church, when I stopped going to church, uh, my aunt, my aunts were, like saying things like, "Oh, you're the child of Satan. Like God doesn't favor you anymore," and like all of this shaming, because I decided not to be a part of that. So I can
it must
see.
be I'm Roman Catholic, and it's not that crazy over here.
No, that's
Well,
good.
you live in the US. You live in the US, and, like, man, you have priests got tattoos,
That's
dude,
awesome.
you still got free will, you know, and they respect
Yeah,
that. So
yeah, but
I wonder if it's just the Catholicism mixed with the Muslim culture,
mhm. They're
and
really similar, they're aligned with each other, although they fight with each other all the time, like fighting about whose God is greater, right?
yeah,
But they have the same values, really. And yeah, and it's the same system. Shaming as a method of bullying to make you feel bad or to punish you, so that you stay on the track of what the culture expects you to be, to
yeah.
maintain, to perpetuate, that culture, basically.
Did you have, like, a breaking moment? Like, "I need to get out of this country," or you
I
kinda just always kinda
had
grew up like, "I'm not staying here
oh,
since
yeah,
I'm able to, I'm leaving."
growing up, I had always dreamt of leaving. First was to leave my parents' house since I was, like, 10. Maybe 9, even earlier. I get myself lost in movies, American movies, well, actually European movies and British too. And the reason why I don't have an accent is because I had always been exposed to American TV series, and that's what I grew up with. And I was always reading, books, from, well, actually American writers, written by American writers. And interestingly, when I was 10, I read The Scarlet Letter. That was 5th grade, I remember. And, they were talking, well, I don't know if you know, if you're familiar with the stories of,
Oh, yeah, we had to read
Esther.
that book in school.
Oh, okay. And it was, how this woman was ostracized for having a child outside wedlock, right?
Yep.
You know what? That is so similar. That's what they're still doing here in this country where I was growing up that time. Dang. And so if you actually think about, I mean, well, I haven't been living in Indonesia for, I don't know, probably 20, almost 20 years now.
Okay.
So, well, actually, has it been 20 years? Yeah, probably. And so I'm sure things have developed then,
Yeah, that was
at
gonna be my
least I
question,
hope.
like, if that was gonna be my question, if you were to go back today, what do you think it would be like? Would you be treated still as in class because 'cause you're a woman, or would you be treated with equal respect?
I think it would be more, I have a more elevated status because I'm not living in the US.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd be considered as, "Oh, she is not really one of them," like, and there's, like, this, I I I won't say,
So, do you
well,
think they'll hide it then? So, I if I went
they
to
would
Indonesia as American, you think they'll kinda hide their culture from me? Or I won't
so,
see that abuse?
would they see what they did, like, in the past, like, say to me as an abuse now?
Yeah.
I think, well, they probably would, because some of them still think that in order to make your child respect you, you gotta beat them up, right? And it's like a generational thing. Um, I mean, and they won't be happy, especially if they're older than you and you can correct them. Like, that's so disrespectful. And so, okay, but I have more freedom to, to say whatever I think anyway, because, I'm not one of them anymore. So if they
Yeah.
judge me, like, it does not affect me. So I'm at a different place right now. I'm detached. But I mean, they would think that it's too rough, but they would still practice it anyway
Yeah.
because
I
they can
used
get
to
away with it because there's no law there.
I used to work with a doctor, and this doctor was American, who were afraid of him because he was mean, and he said the reason why he treats people this way is because they won't mess up. So if he puts fear into his staff, they won't mess up. So that kind of practice is
Interesting.
still going on today, even over here.
With the older generation, I can see that, because that's, I think, how they were brought up. Is this doctor older?
It's gotta be at least 10 years older than me. I'm in my mid-40s now, so I was, like, in my 20s when I worked at the hospital,
Mm,
so
okay.
he was probably, he's probably, like, a new doctor. I can't remember exactly, but I remember him telling the story to another person is why
Yeah.
he does this.
So I could see how this could unfold, in two ways. When you grew up or when you have been exposed to that kind of environment, first, you could just mold into that and think similarly, because, okay, this works for me, because I complied, and then that would be how they run their life, right? With the
Yeah,
examples that they've been given. And the second one, um, it was so suffocating. I hated it there. And that actually inspired me to do everything that's the opposite because I felt that it was so destructive. Um, Like I came to, well, and I only understood how destructive that was when I got out of the house and I was still like, in this, because it was so damaging to your nervous system. And I felt
Yeah.
like everybody was criticizing me, and I would always be in this defensive mode because I felt, because although I was already in Bangkok, right? And nobody was really paying attention to me, but I still felt like, I was being scrutinized and criticized, because that was that's how I was trained. And so it took me a long time to actually heal from that, to tell me that I'm safe, I'm not in Indonesia anymore. And so that inspired me to do things differently, to raise my child in ways that are the opposite from my parents. And, I'm so happy that he's in a school where his friends are supportive and his teachers are holistic. And we live in a country where abuse is abuse and it's outlawed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm grateful for all the experience that I've had in the past because it inspired me to seek freedom
Yeah.
and live in a world of choices like where I am now. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I like when it comes to happy ending and silver linings,
Yeah.
that's where I am.
That's perfect. Jenny, I want to thank you for coming on my podcast today to share your story. If people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
I'm active on Instagram. So
Okay.
I'll send you the details of my social media handles so that you can share it with
Perfect. Yep. I'll
your
share it in the
audience.
show notes. Yep.
Awesome.
Awesome. Jenny, thanks again for coming on today.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
And for myself, you can always find us at our very own website, which is www.breakingbullying.com. You can also reach out to us at our email address. If you have a story of your own bullying to share, or for whatever reason you want to get a hold of us, our email address is breakbullyinghere@gmail.com. Now, if you're a victim of bullying and you don't know where to turn, there is online resources to help you. The first is the government's very own anti-bullying website, and the address is www.stopbullying.gov. And other online resource is www.pacer.org/bullying. Now, if you have had thoughts of suicide or of self-harm, we implore you to stop. Reach out to the National Suicide Hotline. That number is very simple. It's 988. I'm Tim Flynn, and thank you for listening, and we will be back next week to continue the conversation to break the silence on bullying.